We have 13 soldiers, men and women, who are dead because of these actions and this yippee-ki-yay crazy out of this administration. But here's the other dividing line here, which is fundamentally just a parable in itself about this administration. The Strait of Hormuz. Now, from everything we've been told, and this goes to my first point, they obliterated any obstacles that could stand in their way to keeping this channel open. And yet, here we are. And David Rhodes, our MS Now correspondent, notes, Gregory Brew, a senior Iran and energy analyst with Eurasia Group, a geopolitical risk consulting firm, told MS Now Iran's new control of the strait has given it more leverage than it had before the war. Hello, people.
Yeah.
Where are we, John? Yeah. I mean, the enemy controls the game.
It's a fair point, Michael. I mean, 40 days ago, before the war started, the strait was open, completely open. And shipping companies didn't have to check with Iran before going through the Strait of Hormuz and that tiny little narrow gap there. It was open, and something on the order of 100 to 135 ships per day were transiting in and out. And now we're down to, barely a trickle. And if the 10-point plan, the maximalist plan that the Iranians put forward, is allowed to, persist. I mean, they'll get to a point where they're actually making money, like it's almost like a toll booth, which is unfathomable to me. That after 40 days of war, Iran would have not only the continued ability to close the strait, but to profit off of it. And I have to hope that they're not going to be allowed to do that come these meetings in Pakistan. The other thing that's worth noting here, and I think people should remember, is they closed the strait down in the first 3 days of the war without even firing a shot. Just fear alone kept shipping companies and insurance companies from letting traffic go. They didn't have to shoot a drone or launch a mine into the water. And even if they do, it only takes just one, to shut down traffic. Just one drone hit, one mine hit, and not only will they stop the traffic physically by having a ship that's obstructing the channel, but they'll also be able to do it over a long term, because that fear will just come right back. I saw an interesting comment yesterday after the ceasefire was announced from the CEO of Maersk, a big shipping company. Everybody knows Maersk. And he basically said, we're going to wait and see. We're not just going to launch right into the strait here. We got to make sure that the security guarantees are sufficient. And as far as I know, his fears and his concerns have not been allayed.
And you think about it, John, I mean, it seems like the aspect of deterrence that the U.S. had over Iran for all those years has shrunk significantly, because they have taken our toughest punch and are seemingly still in power and control a very valuable strait. It doesn't look good there. I'd like to talk to you about NATO for a second, if I may. My late grandfather was a proud member of the American Legion. I'm on all their email lists, and they don't really send out a lot of stuff. But I got an email today from the American Legion about NATO and the president's comments about possibly moving NATO bases, American bases, to other more sympathetic NATO countries to the American interest, et cetera. It prompted a statement today from bipartisan from some senators. I want to read it. Quote, as an alliance of 32 nations, we will always have our differences, but it is critical that we work together to strengthen, not divide, our partnership. Any signal the United States is stepping back risks emboldening Russia and China. A divided and broken NATO is their chief strategic aim. It almost seems, John, that this war in Iran that the president launched out of nowhere is now having the effect of weakening NATO. Can you talk to us about how significant that is and problematic it is for the future?
Well, it's hugely significant, but let me go back to the central core here. I mean, there's nothing. The only thing more important to Vladimir Putin than the dissolution or the weakening of the NATO alliance is his subjugation of Ukraine. That's what he wants. He wants Ukraine, and he doesn't want to value their sovereignty. But, man, the next thing on his to-do list is to divide the West, and certainly to try to break up NATO, or at least diminish NATO's influence. And the constant bickering and disagreements that the United States has had with NATO over the last year is really doing his work for him. The dispute over Greenland and whether we can take it or invade made it, as it belongs to a NATO ally, and then the haranguing of our NATO allies over opening the strait and their reluctance to get involved in a war they didn't start and frankly weren't consulted on. All of that is doing Putin's bidding for him. So it's actually working against our national security interests. And then just back to your larger point, Luke, about the importance of NATO. This is the most successful military alliance in human history, bar none. And one of the only things that has been preventing Putin from achieving goal number one, taking Ukraine, has been the NATO alliance and the solidarity in supporting Ukraine. And now that's starting to break down. In fact, the United States is no longer leading the coalition effort to support Ukraine. We're selling arms, or we were selling arms to Europe for Europe to give to Ukraine. And now we're not even doing that. So I really worry about the security environment in Europe as well as the Middle East by the potential dissolution here of NATO's solidarity and NATO's unity.
Kirby, I wonder what your take is on these competing narratives, as some may call them, made-up stories, lies, others may call them, that the government keeps putting forward about this war and about the negotiations and what's actually happening between the United States, Israel, and Iran. Because it really made me, we were talking on our call earlier today, and it made me think about Vietnam and everything that I've read and seen about the war in Vietnam. That's where the credibility gap really, that was language that was being used at the time. And the credibility gap was established because people weren't believing the story that the government was telling about the war because it was in direct contradiction to what they could see and feel. And so the president is telling us they're making great headway with Iran, but like the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. We're being told the prices are going to come down soon, but like gas is still very high. Prices are going up across the board. What is your take on just the messaging and the lack of truth, frankly, that is being put forward here?
You know, Simone, there's been an interesting sort of dynamic here on the messaging front. You have the military leaders, General Kane, Admiral Cooper, being very concise and precise about the objectives and the limited nature of the objectives they're going after. You know, the Iranian Navy, their ballistic missile capability, defense industrial base, nuclear ambitions, very limited military goals. And the military leaders have been very consistent about that. And I will say that in the outset, Secretary Hegseth also was on the same playbook here in terms of the limited objectives that they were trying to achieve. But over time, as this war has progressed, you're seeing a big separation between the political messaging from the White House and from the political leadership at the Pentagon from the military messaging. General Kane, even just yesterday in his presser, was again very circumspect about what this ceasefire meant and, just as importantly, what it didn't mean, whereas Secretary Hegseth was a little bit more loose, should we say, in the way he was kind of describing things. So there's been this divergence. And I can tell you that one of the things the military really needs and values and wants is clear-cut messaging on what they're supposed to be doing. They believe that they are still tasked with achieving those limited objectives, but when the political leadership is going off on things like unconditional surrender and regime change and things that can't be achieved, it does make the military leaders more nervous about what they're actually trying to achieve and whether they're going to be able to achieve it. I'll say one last thing on this. Yesterday, you heard from the White House and the Pentagon that it was victory with a capital V. We won, we won, we won. You're hearing the same thing from the mullahs and the clerics and the IRGC in Iran. Hey, we won, we won, we won. This is a ceasefire, and the peace talks are only just beginning, or will begin this weekend. There's a long way to go before either side can claim victory here. But if it were to end right now, and they were just everybody pulled the plug, I think there is a valid argument to be made that Iran will be in some ways more powerful and more influential than they were before it started.